Welcome to our Friday Yin. I'm Morgan, for those of you that have never met me or taken my class before. Today we are going to be working with very grounding postures, but specifically ones that are related to our water meridian. And if you're not interested in the philosophy side of traditional Chinese medicine yin classes, that's totally fine. If you are, and you've never heard of water meridians, they're basically lines of energy that run through our body, that chi or prana in our yoga terms would classify that as. But chi is basically energy, prana, life force, however you want to word it. But it's basically, they're just lines of energy that run through our body. So one of them is the bladder meridian. It's going to start on the inside of the eye, wrap around the head, move down either side of the spine, through the middle of the leg, and all the way down to the foot. Kidney meridian is going to start right at the sole of the foot, work through the inner leg, around the groin, up to underneath the collarbone. So we're working with the full body today. Beyond that, though, I had this kind of thought this past week. Lately, personally, I've been creating a lot of boundaries in my life, and one thing that has brought up for me is this idea of our value. And oftentimes, we tend to undervalue ourselves, our time, and just in general, either with other people or just internally. So today we're going to be playing with this idea of valuing ourselves, asking, do we value ourselves? What does that look like in our practice? And what does that look like outside of our practice? So I'll speak on that more as we get started. Today we're going to start in a very different posture. So let's go ahead and grab that big bolster that we have. And I'm going to bring that right in the mat, right in the middle where my pelvis is going to go. We are going to start with this big bolster right on our pelvis and abdomen so that we can begin to relieve some of that lumbar space. So if we want, we can have a blanket here for the bottom of our legs, just to add a little bit of cushion so we're not against the ground. But we're gonna just find our way to come on top of that bolster. Again, we might have to adjust it a little bit here to make it more comfortable for us. But then once we've found a good spot for it, we're just going to begin to lay fully on our belly. And we'll start with our right cheek on the back of our hand. So we're looking over towards our left. And I'll let us know when we're about halfway through this posture, but just beginning to settle in here, noticing maybe how the body feels right off the bat with this posture. If the big bolster is too big, you're welcome to just roll up a blanket or bring in a little bolster to make this more suitable for you. Otherwise, just beginning to settle in here. And today we'll just start by taking a deep breath in through the nose. And a long, audible exhale. Letting go of the week we've had. Letting go of the morning we've had. Letting go of any to-do lists the week ahead. And just beginning to come into this moment right here and now. And as we begin to settle into our practice, we might begin to notice the sounds that we hear within our space. And seeing if we can begin to become aware of these sounds, these feelings, these things that we are picking up on, without necessarily labeling them, without judging them. Just allowing our awareness to move with the experience around us. Maybe we take this idea of water, right? Water flows. It doesn't get stuck, and if it does, it begins to find ways where it can move around, where it can adapt, where it can let go. So as you begin to become aware of the things that are filling your space, the things that your senses are becoming aware of, seeing if we cannot get stuck on one particular thought, one particular smell, taste, voice, whatever it is that we're hearing, a sound, And just allowing our awareness to move freely here. And maybe that means that it begins to check in with the body. Noticing how it feels to lay against the earth, to lay against our home, against our mat. We might begin to notice all the parts of us that are connecting with the ground. Maybe we begin to feel different textures against our skin, against our body. We might notice parts of our body that might be resisting or holding. And if that's the case, seeing if we can just allow the body to soften here. Knowing that we are supported against our home, in our practice, and in our bodies. It is safe to let go. We'll take a few more rounds of breath with our cheek on this side. Making a mental note of any areas in our body that feel maybe a little tired, a little tense, a little maybe heavy. And when you're ready, we'll begin to turn our head to the other direction, coming onto our left cheek now. And this might feel different or weird in some ways. Maybe we are used to facing one direction. And so just noticing those habits here. As we begin along our journey through yoga, we begin to develop our body awareness. And so as we are here, seeing if we can cultivate that a little bit. What feels different as we turn our head? Are there spaces within my neck that could use a little more of my breath to soften, to help find space, to find ease? Taking your time to allow your mind to wind down. If you're still kind of floating around, thinking of things that we might have to do today, seeing if we can value ourselves enough to maybe take those and set them aside off of our mat. We promise we'll get to them later and we'll have the time to give them our full attention, but right now, we remind ourselves that we are worthy of this time. That this time is valuable. We are worthy of that value. We'll take a few more rounds of breath here, maybe checking in with our mental body, noticing the consistency of our thoughts. And as we begin to notice our thoughts, we might also begin to become aware of that space between our thoughts. And maybe it's not a space between, but a space behind or below. But a space in your mind that is quiet, that is still. That constant space of peace and loving awareness. And so as we watch our thoughts drift by, as we watch them flow through our awareness, can we begin to sit back in that space of stillness? Lovingly aware of all the things that we are experiencing here. Without getting attached, without expecting, without judging. And as we sit back and watch our thoughts, we might also begin to notice our breath as it moves in and out of the body. We might notice as we inhale, our belly begins to press against our prop, lifting the low back away from the ground. And as we exhale, allowing our bodies to soften against the earth. Full body breathing here. Inhale from crown to tips of our toes, expanding our body, our ribs, our spine. And exhale, we begin to release here. As we tune into our breath, as we take deeper and deeper inhales and longer exhales, we take a moment to check in with our heart space, noticing how we feel today. And maybe this is the first time that you've had the moment to check in with yourself and how you feel. And so seeing if we can be honest today. There's no right or wrong answer. And it is okay if we're not doing good. It's okay if we're feeling, a little sad, a little anxious. One thing I really love about water is its ability to show the full scope of emotion, or to symbolize the full scope of emotion. And whether an ocean is raging, whether a river is raging, or whether it is calm and still, we seem to always, as humans, find peace in water, around water. And so whether you're feeling maybe a little anxious today, or whether you're feeling relatively content with where you are, seeing if we can begin to meet those both with the same peace, with the same acceptance, with the same value. Because no matter where we are in our life in this moment, we are still valuable and worthy of being honest with how we are doing. So we'll take a few more quiet breaths here. Final round of breath. And when you're ready, we'll begin to prop ourselves up onto our forearms, bring our head back to center. We'll tuck the toes. We'll bring the hands underneath the shoulders, and we'll gently begin to press ourselves back into a child's pose. So big toes are gonna come together. Knees might go wide if we want to sink into the hips, or they might begin to stay closer together if we need some low back release. Our arms can stay outstretched, or they can begin to come out behind us, palms face up. Forehead can come down to that bolster that we were resting on, or we can take it, move it off to the side, and begin to bring it down to our mat. So many different variations, finding the one that works for your body this morning. And we'll begin to settle in a little bit more here. Finding our tail drawing heavier towards our heels. Letting go of this need to really tuck the chin here and see if we can just allow the back of our neck to stay neutral. Not over flexing, not overextending in the neck, but just finding a nice space where we feel that our neck is nice and safe. It's nice and neutral. We're not compressing or crunching or twisting in any way. And as we begin to maybe wake up a little bit here as we're in our child's pose, maybe we breathe a little deeper. We might also begin to reflect on moments where we maybe have felt valued, whether it be by ourselves or by other people. Or maybe we begin to notice that maybe it's hard to think of times we felt valued, but maybe it might be, where did I feel not valued? Whether that be in my practice. Was it when I pushed myself a little too hard? Was it when I didn't offer myself the kindness of a prop? It doesn't have to be anything deep, anything grand. It can be very simple. How do we begin to show ourselves value? How do we begin to feel valued? Maybe taking time to love that part of yourself, that inner child that at one point maybe didn't feel valued or seen or heard. I know a lot of us have been through things as children, whether we had the greatest parents in the world or not. I know we've been in moments where maybe we felt a little less valued. So how can we begin to love and have compassion for that part of us, to acknowledge that part of us? I am worthy of being valued by myself and by others. I am an intrinsic part of this grand universe. I am needed. All parts of me are valuable. We're about halfway. If we'd like to maybe adjust any of our props or any of our positioning, we're welcome to do so here. If you find that your feet are starting to fall asleep, we might come out for a moment, bring a prop between the legs and sink back in. Or we might begin to widen our toes and widen our knees a little bit and sink the hips between the heels for tadpole. This does tend to help blood flow a little bit more down towards the feet. So deciding again where you want to be, and then we'll begin to tune back in with our breath. Even if all I do today is breathe and be, I am still worthy and valuable. Taking a few more rounds of breath here. Final round of breath, taking your time. And when you're ready, we'll gently begin to draw our hands under our shoulders. We'll begin to lift ourselves forward and up and into our table, maybe taking a moment here to extend one leg back behind us, noticing how that leg feels, maybe getting a little blood flow back into the toes. And we'll bend that knee and we'll begin to extend the other leg back behind us. Again, just allowing for some of that blood flow to return to the feet. We might do circles in the ankles or point and flex the toes. And then we'll all return to our table here. We'll go ahead and move that big bolster off to the side if you had been using it in our child's pose. We might bring a bolster or blanket underneath the knees. And we're going to go ahead and grab blocks if we have them. They're not required, but if you have them, they might be helpful. And so we'll bring our hands onto our blocks and we'll begin to step the left leg forward, however that has to happen. So if it's here and you have to physically grab it and maneuver it, that's fine. So once you have that left foot forward, we'll heel toe the foot towards the top of the mat a little bit more, making sure that as we begin to sink into our next posture, our dragon or our low lunge, that our knee stays stacked over the left ankle and does not go in front of the left toes. We don't want to drive that pressure forward into our knees. If the blanket isn't quite doing it for the back knee, we might bring a bolster underneath our entire shin. If this is what you do, we want to make sure that we tuck the back toes to keep ourselves stable. Otherwise, we'll just all begin to settle the hips forward into our low lunge or dragon. Making sure that if we're using our blocks that we have soft elbows and soft tops of our shoulders. Sometimes we have a tendency to take some of the weight away from our hips and pelvis and legs and bring it into our hands. This does feel better sometimes, and we want to make sure that we're keeping the arms soft. So if you know that you're carrying some of the weight in your arms, maybe we play with bringing our hands up to our thigh and seeing how that feels. Heart is lifting forward and up, thinking about really broadening through the front of the chest. Crown of the head shines towards the sky, and we're breathing here. Full rounds of breath down towards the basin of our pelvic bowl. We might even begin to feel our breath down towards the right quad, maybe even in towards the right knee. Continuing to breathe here. Noticing if your mind is starting to maybe resist this posture in any way. And seeing if we can begin to support ourselves here. A part of valuing ourselves is finding ways to support ourselves. Whether that be by creating boundaries, whether that be by maybe in our physical practice, if we have to, coming out for a moment, understanding that this doesn't make us any less of a yogi practitioner or any less valuable. And if we have to, when we're ready, coming and sinking back in. So taking some breaks is a way that we can show that we value ourselves and that we value our practice. It's a way to set aside the ego, to set aside the expectation and judgments. We're about halfway. So if we'd like to begin to move deeper, we might grab this left block and left hand and bring it on the inside of the left foot. We can heel toe the left foot all the way to the edge of the mat. The big toe and inner arch are going to begin to peel off the mat, and that left knee is going to begin to hang open for gecko. If this is really comfortable for you, you're welcome to stay here, or we might begin to come down onto our forearms, even if it means that our blocks are at the highest level. If we come onto our forearms, something we want to be mindful of, a way that our body really likes to kind of cheat in a way is our hips stay up and back, stacked over the right knee, and our chest drops forward. If this is something that you know your body likes to try and do, see if we can stay on the hands and just begin to sink the hips down, really focusing on that quad, the inner left hip, and the pelvic space. Take a few more rounds of our slowest and most mindful breaths here. Directing our breath into the places that might feel a little tight or resistant to this. As we breathe into that space, does it change what we feel? Can we begin to create that space in our body with our breath? One more breath like this, taking your time. And if you were on your forearms, we'll begin to just make our way back up onto our hands. We'll go ahead and begin to bring that left big toe back down to the mat. Our hips will begin to shift slightly back as we heel toe that left foot forward or back in towards our midline. Left hand comes to the outside of that left foot. We'll begin to prop ourselves up, and then whatever way this needs to happen, we'll begin to slide that left leg long behind us once again. Taking a moment to extend through that left heel and just feel the body. Notice what you feel. Notice sensations in that left leg, maybe in the right quad. And then we'll begin to make our way onto that other side. So adjusting the props as needed. Maybe we bring a bolster under this left shin now, tucking the left toes, or a blanket. However this needs to happen, we'll begin to draw the right leg forward. Heel toe that foot to the top of our mat so that as we're ready and beginning to shift the hips forward, that right knee stays stacked or behind the right toes. And right away, noticing any differences you feel on this side. Maybe you find that this side is a little easier or harder in some way. Just acknowledging the patterns in our body. Getting to know our body. Tops of the shoulders soften. Elbows are bent as our weight sinks down towards our hips. Chest is lifting. Collarbones are broadening. Crown of the head, not chin, not forehead, not nose. Crown of the head is extending tall towards the sky. Being kind to yourself here. You know, if your shape looks a little different than maybe you hope, or maybe the way that I or someone else looks, set that aside and take a moment to remind yourself that no matter what you look like in your practice in life, no matter what your personality traits are, that you are still valuable and you are still worthy of being valued. Breathing here. Noticing if we've begun to tense or to hold in any spaces, seeing if we can let some of that go. One more breath like this. And we'll begin to bring that right hand on the inside of the right foot. You are always welcome to stay in our dragon if that's something that you want. Otherwise, we'll heel toe the right foot off to the edge of our mat. We'll begin to let the right knee hang open. Right big toe begins to peel off of our mat. And we'll sink the hips back forward and down here. Again, option to stay lifted, or if the wrists are feeling a little cranky, we might stack our blocks and come down onto our forearms. Again, if we do this, attempting not to round up through the spine, not to lift up through the hips, but we want to keep that length that we found in our dragon as we make our way down onto our forearms. This might feel a little intense. As long as it's not painful, seeing if we can maybe linger in that intensity, breathe, find a little bit of peace. Or simply acknowledge that sometimes discomfort is a part of life. And so as we practice lingering in some of that discomfort here, attempting to breathe, attempting to find peace, we begin to make it easier to find that same peace and to move through discomfort in our external life off of the mat. Noticing if you're kind of compressing the back of your neck or dropping the back of your skull to your back. See if we can give the back of our neck a little bit of length here, maybe looking slightly down and in front of you. A few more rounds of deep breath here. In your own time, we'll begin to press ourselves back up onto our hands. Bringing the right big toe back down to the mat, we'll heel toe it in towards our midline. Shifting the hips back over the left knee, we'll begin to slide the right leg out long behind us. Wrists are stacked under the shoulders. Our hands could be on blocks if we would like, but the back right heel is pressing long towards the back of our room as the crown of our head lengthens forward. Thinking about this entire back body, finding length, opening. Taking one full round of breath here, noticing sensations that you feel. And then we'll begin to bend that right knee. We'll move our blocks off to the side and we'll begin to make our way onto our bottoms. So maybe that means that we have a blanket underneath us. That's great. We're gonna head into dragonfly. So thinking about opening the legs as wide as comfortable today. It doesn't have to be super wide if this is not comfortable. Maybe it's a little closer. If we like it wide, but we notice that our knees are rolling inward, then give yourself a little bit of support here and bring it in. We don't want our knees to roll inward. This shortens the muscle that we're trying to lengthen. So finding a good space for your legs. Maybe that means bringing blankets underneath the knees. Maybe that means coming up onto a bolster underneath your sits bones. I am going to bring blocks out in front of me to rest my head on. But you're also welcome to create maybe a bridge here. So maybe you would like to rest on a bolster. So making yourself as supported and comfortable as possible here. And then when you've found a good place, we'll take a deep breath, bring our hands out in front of us, lengthen the spine, and as you exhale, we'll begin to walk ourselves forward. Finding a good space to stop that first edge, that first space of sensation, taking one more breath in to the body, and as you're ready, exhale, we round down through the spine. One thing I really love about this posture is this forces us to take up space. And a lot of us, especially people who have been, groups of minorities, whether that be people who are women or non-binary or, have a different race or culture, we tend to be told not to take up space, to kind of make ourselves smaller. We dim our light so that we don't put others off. And this posture forces us to take up that space, to allow ourselves to be expansive, to be worthy of broadening, of opening. So consider that here. Is there moments in my life where I dim my light, where I make myself smaller in order to not put others off, in order to protect myself in any way? And how can I begin to flip that script? How can I begin to tell myself, no, I am worthy of shining my light and I am valuable. My light is valuable. The things that I have to say are valuable. The space that I take up is valuable. I am worthy of that space. And if this isn't resonating with you, that's totally fine. It can be as simple as a physical practice today. It doesn't have to be anything other than what you need it to be. We're about halfway through. Noticing if our breath has begun to shorten. See if we can keep it expansive. Final round of breath here. And on your next inhale, we'll begin to ground through the palm of our hands and slowly begin to roll up one vertebrae at our time, taking our time. And as we reach that tall, neutral spine, once again, softening the tops of our shoulders, softening our jaw, lifting through the crown of the head and taking a moment to just feel, to notice what you feel. In your own time, we'll begin to draw the soles of the feet together, keeping the knees nice and open, coming into our butterfly shape. Now, some of us might want blocks underneath our knees or our thighs to keep us supported. One reason we might do this is if our hips are a little tight this morning. Another reason we might do this is if one hip sits higher than the other, let's go ahead and bring that lower hip to match the higher one. You're also welcome to bring a bolster underneath or between both of the knees here. When you're ready, we'll walk the sits bones out behind us. We might grab a block for our forehead to rest on, we might not. But when you feel ready, we'll inhale, lengthen the spine. Exhale, begin to hinge forward, finding that space of sensation, that edge where you begin to feel this posture doing something. And then when you found that space, take another round of breath here, and then exhale, we bow our heads down to that space. We honor the space in which our body is at today. No judgments on how far the head goes down. No judgments on whether or not we're still basically seated. Only acceptance. Just allowing what is to be and honoring that space.
And if your mind has wandered away here, seeing if we can tune back in with our breath. Our mind deserves time to find calm, to be outside of the demands of our life, of the external world, and to simply be present with our aliveness, with our breath, with our being, with our practice. We're about halfway. If you'd like to begin to move into a deeper space, you're more than welcome to here. One way we might do that is we might begin to take one hand and forearm, slide it underneath our calf, take the other hand and forearm and slide it underneath the other one, anchoring the palms into the earth as we begin to fold ourselves back in, coming into our tortoise. If this is too much for today, you're welcome to stay in your butterfly. Remember that we are not forcing ourselves to move beyond our edge. Yin is a passive practice where we allow the body to move at its own pace, where we stay grounded, where we find peace and we find our breath. Few more rounds of breath here. Final round of breath. And when you're ready, we'll remove the hands if we had them underneath either shin. And once we have that, our hands will come to our feet. We'll take a moment here, maybe give ourselves a little massage, maybe even coming into that kidney 1 point, that space right at the sole of your foot underneath the second or third toe. We might just press around here, and maybe it's just to warm the feet up or to warm the fascia, that's fine, but giving ourselves a little love, giving our feet a little love. And then when you're ready, on your next inhale, we'll pause with our hands on our inner ankle, and we'll begin to roll up 1 vertebrae at a time, really seeing how slow, how long we can make this. And as we walk ourselves up, noticing what the spine feels like, and eventually we'll come into that neutral space. Tops of the shoulders will soften down, crown of the head lifts, and we take a moment just to feel the body. Reaching for the outer edges of our legs, we'll close them together. We're going to take a little rebound here. We did a lot of external rotation, so we're going to get a little internal rotation. Feet are going to walk out as the knees drop in, hands come out behind us. And we can rest here. If this feels comfortable, feel free to linger in this space. Otherwise, we might take one leg in a little bit more than the other, seeing what that feels like. Pausing there for a round of breath. And we might check out that other side. And we'll bring both legs back into our midline, feet are wide. We'll pause here for 1 more round of breath. And we'll begin to heel toe the feet back hip distance apart. We'll take any props and we'll move them off to the side of our mat. We're going to bring our feet to the very top of our mat. Make sure that we have access to our props though, so somewhere within reach as we make our way onto our backs. Feet are going to plant at the top of our mat. We might keep a blanket underneath our low back as we begin to roll onto our backs here. Once you get there, we might hug the legs in towards the body. Maybe just noticing what our spine, or rather either side of our spine feels like. So we're taking our awareness into the bladder meridian here. We might notice maybe one side feels a little more sore than the other, or maybe they both feel relatively good today, and that's cool. Just taking time to get to know what you're feeling and what your body is like right now. Pausing in center, we'll hug the legs in, holding in a static space for 1 breath. And then keeping that right leg hugged in, we'll extend the left leg down long to the end of our mat. So we're coming into our wind relieving postures here. There's a reason they call them wind relieving postures. This is because they help with our digestion, which can cause us to excrete wind. And so if you feel your tummy grumbling here, if you feel your digestive tract working, good. Benefit of practicing from home. No one will know if you release wind. So we're actively breathing into the right side of our body here as the thigh hugs in towards either the outer edge of our right side or towards the abdominals. This depends on what is accessible for our body. We're working with our large intestine here a little bit, our ascending colon. So on this right side, it begins to go up And so we're just beginning to massage this space with our breath, really thinking about breathing deeply, so much so that you maybe feel the belly or the abdominals or the ribs pressing against that right quad. One more breath like this. And we'll take one inhale. And as you exhale, that right shin will come into the left hand and we'll begin to cross the right leg over the body. Right hand is going to stay planted on the right side of our mat. Now we have a couple options for this right leg. One, we can let it just hang out here. We might bring something underneath the inside of that right knee, either a block to keep it supported or a bolster if that's more comfortable. Or we might realize that we have the space in our spine to let the right knee come all the way down to the ground. Now, if we do this and the right shoulder begins to lift, then I'm going to say maybe we come out, ground down through that right shoulder and just bring something underneath the right knee and let the spine ravel itself. We don't want to crank the vertebrae into something that is not meant for our bodies today. Twists are great, but they can also really damage or cause harm to our spine if we force them. So just be mindful of that. And once we've kind of established what our spine, shoulder, and legs are like, we might begin to involve the neck by looking over that right shoulder. If this is just way too much for the low back, we might bend both of the legs and let them both fall over. This tends to be a little less intense. My value is not determined by what my body can do. My value is not determined by my productivity level. And my value is certainly not determined by other people. We are valuable simply because we are alive. Couple more rounds of breath here. Final round of breath. And as you're ready, we'll begin by bringing the head back to center. We'll grab hold of that left knee or right knee, and we'll begin to bring the right leg back to center. Hugging the right leg in towards the abdominal for one more full inhale in. And as you exhale, right leg extends down long to the end of our mat. Pausing, letting the right leg rest heavy towards the mat, and just taking a moment to feel. Maybe we notice a difference between the right and the left side. Maybe the right leg feels longer, warmer, more open, looser. And on your next inhale, we'll begin to draw the left knee up towards the abdominals. Again, we can bring it to the outside of our rib cage, or we can hug it more in towards our midline, depending on what is accessible and how that feels. We're beginning to work with our descending colon here. Breathing deeply, massaging our abdominals with our breath. Few more active breaths here. One more inhale in. And as you exhale, left hand comes down to the mat, right hand draws the left knee over the body and into our twist on the other side. We might support this twist with props. We might just let that left knee hang over. Again, being very mindful of our low back space and not cranking it. If it feels like we're cranking it, we might come out a little bit and just prop ourselves up. Once we feel comfortable in our lower body, we might begin to turn our head towards the left, looking over the left shoulder. Even though we're nearing the end of our practice here today, making sure that we're staying active with our breathing. If it's begun to kind of shallow or mellow out, seeing if we can take our final few rounds of breath here as deeply as we can. Maybe it's even the deepest breath we've taken all day. Final breath. And we'll begin by bringing our head back to center, pausing here, and then gently beginning to bring that left leg back to center. Hugging the left knee in towards the abdominals or the outside of our body for one more inhale. And exhale, left leg extends down long to the end of our mat. We allow it to become heavy here, noticing what we feel. Both legs will begin to draw in and up. We'll plant the feet underneath our knees. We'll reach for our block. We'll begin to lift the hips, bringing the block underneath the sacrum spine. If you don't have a block and would like to use a bolster or pillow, that's fine too. Once we have a nice space for that, it's going to be, the sacrum, by the way, is between the glutes, right underneath the hips. It's a little flat part of our spine. So once we've found that space, we can stay here for a few rounds of breath. We might keep the feet planted. We might extend the legs out long, ending our practice in the opposite way that we started it. Or we might send the legs up towards the sky, just giving ourselves a little bit of blood flow in the other direction. We'll be here for a couple rounds of breath. One more breath. And if you had the legs extended or lifted, we'll go ahead and bring them back underneath the knees. We'll begin to lift the hips gently here, removing the block, placing it off to the side, coming onto our backs. We'll take any other movement that our body is calling for here, any other posture, shape. Otherwise, beginning to find our way into our final resting posture, Shavasana. Traditionally, this is done flat on our backs, legs out long, hands down by the sides, palms facing up to receive energy, palm facing down to ground. But you're welcome to take any other shape that is going to be more suited for your stillness here. Taking a few moments to get into that shape. And then as you do, we'll begin to allow the body to soften towards the earth. Allowing each toe to soften. Letting go of any holding in the ankles, the calves, the hips, allowing the spine to rest heavy towards our prop or towards the earth. Our shoulders drop. Our arms become heavy. Our jaw begins to soften. Our eyelids begin to become heavy or close, letting go of any tension in the forehead, letting go of any tension in our mind. As we begin to soften back into our loving awareness, that space of stillness and peace, Shavasana. Lessons from the cosmos. The idea that there is enough DNA in each of our bodies, that if it were laid out end to end, it would stretch between the Sun and Pluto 7 times. And yet, we still treat ourselves like we are so very small. The idea that the universe loved us enough that it painted a perfect picture of itself in each of our cells to remind us that there is always, and yet we belittle ourselves and think no one loves us. The idea that we believe we are not walking miracles, even though each footstep confirms it, each heartbeat is a chorus from the stars that made us. Your existence is valued. Your existence is needed. Bringing life back to the body with a deep breath in through the nose. And a long, heavy sigh out. Enlivening our limbs with little movements where we feel called to make them here.
As always, an option to close practice exactly where you are, or if you feel called to do so, beginning to find your way up into our comfortable seat. Bringing our right hand over our heart space, stacking the left hand on top of our right, feeling our palms press against our sternum as we listen to the beat of our life pulsing beneath our hands. Bowing our heads in gratitude for this life, understanding that we are worthy and valuable. Thank you so much for joining and sharing your practice with me today. The light in me honors and recognizes the light in each one of you. Om Shanti. Om Peace. Namaste.